Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Hall. The good-looking guy next to me, I'm not sure which side I'm going to end up being on. That's Justin Baker. Hi, Justin.
Hi.
We are going to be performing some funerals today. You know, it would have been so much cooler. I'm a jackass, and I forget that I'm going to be on camera until like 10 minutes before. Because I'm still not used to it, but I should have like a full-on suit, be like a funeral director, ready to perform some funerals. I don't know if that's insensitive, but yeah,
You've got the organ behind you. I mean,
that's so true. I could like just pull it around. Yeah. It reminds me of. Have you seen the show? Oh shoot, The Righteous Gemstones on HBO.
Yeah, with what's his name?
With John Goodman and the guy from Eastbound and Down, Danny McBride.
Love him,
dude. That is such a funny show. But their Uncle Billy in that show, he starts playing on the piano the songs that guy sings. That is a fantastic show. Totally unrelated to hockey, but if you have any background in like Christianity, religion, church, it is very, very funny. Some may consider it sacrilegious. I think it's just poking fun at the extremes. I think it's hilarious. But anyways, that's what I pictured him playing the piano behind me. Okay, so we're going to perform some funerals. And I think total, we're going to do 6 funerals today. So this is quite the depressing day here at Overtime Hockey Talk for our listeners. If you're a fan of Montreal, Seattle, Calgary, Pittsburgh, Ottawa, or Arizona, then stick around because this is your closure for the year. We are going to do these funerals, and we're going to go through, talk about the season a little bit, what might have been or what should have been for some of these teams, and talk about what's next. With the regular season about 10-ish games away from being over, and where we think these teams will go in the offseason. So with that, why don't we launch it with the Arizona Coyotes? Let's just go right to maybe the most drama-filled team and the least likely team to be in their current location next season.
Oh, that's a whole nother bag of issues. This is the team that I look at, and they're the team with more draft picks than the entire Western Conference combined over the next 3 years. It's insane how many draft picks they have.
Yeah, they have 9 in the first 4 rounds in 2024, and the same in 2025. I think they've got 8. So yeah, they're loaded up. They're ready to go.
Yeah, sad part is they don't have a lot of first-round picks. They've only got 1 in each draft. But a bevy.
I would imagine that something will come.
I hope so. You think they need to make a couple moves here. So we'll see. But this team, Arizona, was a conundrum to me because they were a team this year that I expected to compete for a playoff spot. And I think a majority of the year they were hanging out. I mean, they were right there on the bubble. Then out of nowhere, man, they took a dump and like lost 15 out of like 17. They shit the bed, and next thing you know, they are where they are now. And I think that's too bad because I was really hoping Arizona would push a little bit and make this interesting here in the West.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what's the most interesting thing about them is the fact that, well, they might leave. That's if they end up leaving Arizona, then that's the biggest story maybe of the entire year. I mean, in our lifetime, there has been, especially like you consider the last, like in this century, we've really only seen a team move once, and that's Atlanta going to Winnipeg. And other than that, we have not seen relocation in the National Hockey League. Now, in the 90s, it happened a couple times. Minnesota going to Dallas, which Minnesota got another team, 6 or 7 years later. I will say, if the Coyotes leave, that I think is a likely scenario. That very similar to Minnesota, they will leave, but they will come back. It's too big of a market. They want a team there, but what are you going to do if you can't find a place to play?
Yeah, and they've got cities like Salt Lake City, Houston chomping at the bit right now to get in there. So
Yep.
they're a team without a stadium, and I know they recently proposed like it was a $4 billion arena multiplex, whatever you want to call it. But
well, they have to win an auction, and that auction is what, in like 8 weeks, I believe.
Yeah.
End of May. Well, basically, if they win that auction, I think all will be good. I think they'll be staying. If they lose that auction, they will be leaving, and they will not be back next year. I think it's sealed. They will move.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Probably to Utah. Utah's my
Utah. Okay.
The Salt Lake City team. That's where my money would be on.
Yeah, I could see that because you're still going to pull in a little bit of that fan base from Arizona there still, right? They're still regionally or geographically still close enough. And then, I think after seeing Las Vegas, man, just what they've been able to do in the desert, you think, okay, cool. There's actually fan bases here in the middle of nowhere. And for whatever reason, they haven't figured it out in Arizona. But
yeah. Well, Ryan Smith, he owns the Utah Jazz. He's made an official request to bring an expansion franchise to Utah. And with the NHL, somebody isn't just like, hey, I'm just gonna put in a proposal and I'm gonna tell everybody about it. No. The NHL is so secretive until they go, okay, you can let people know what you're up to now. So the fact that that's out there, it's legit. Whether it's Arizona or it's an expansion team, the NHL is going to Utah.
Yeah, he's already shown the $1 billion in cash expansion fee. They're ready for it.
Right. Seriously. I mean, that's probably around maybe 800, 900 million to get an expansion team at this point. It's pretty crazy. But as far as the team itself, because regardless of whether or not they're in Arizona, you look at what they did this year and what they did a little differently. I think you could see they were a much more structured team. They had the pieces, kind of like bringing in a guy like Kerfoot, Bukestad to a certain extent, making the trade for Sean Dursey. There was upgrades at different positions, and they had guys who could kind of slide up and down the lineup, which I think is what kept them in it for so long. But ultimately, there is just, aside from Clayton Keller, there really is no high-end player on this team other than Dylan Gunther. Of course, he's going to be good, but we're just not quite there yet. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of high-end talent on this team, and that's really why you're not going to hang for very long without it.
No, I mean, yes, Dylan Gunther, you've got the Logan Coolies. That's great. But are they ready for the NHL? Yeah, maybe. But you've got to have a good supporting cast, right? And, I think Chicago tried to do that this year. And I think they did a fairly well enough job surrounding, Connor Bedard with the right veteran talent and the right guys. Unfortunately, Taylor Hall was hurt most of the year, so he wasn't there to support him, and they're still growing too. But I think Chicago's going about it the right way, and maybe Arizona needs to take a page out of their book. Now, the problem with Arizona is they're in a market where it's very difficult to convince people to come in because one, even though they might have $80+ million in cap space available to them, they're not going to spend it to the cap, right? They're a team that's always been just barely trying to hit the floor. They might take on the odd contract, so they're not spending a ton of money to bring in free agents, and so you're not going to attract a lot of talent that way if you are trying to go to that next level, right? So that's the challenge, I think, for Arizona moving forward, especially when you kind of have your location up in limbo. Guys don't want to go there and sign long term because they're like, well, shoot, we might be moving to Utah, next year, so why the frick do I want to sign here?
Right. Especially if you're like, I love Arizona, I love the weather, and then you're going to go to Utah. It's a different vibe for sure. I think this team is going to continue being in limbo until they get an arena, or like we'll know in 8 weeks whether or not they are. And if they end up moving, then I think if Ryan Smith takes control of this team, based on what he's done with the Utah Jazz, I think that they'll be in really good shape. But you have to start making decisions, hard decisions, where you go, is Clayton Keller really going to make a difference for us when we're ready to make a difference in this league? And I don't know that he is. Like, he's your best piece. Do you want him? I think he's probably in a similar boat as what Dylan Larkin was in like 2 or 3 years ago.
That's
And
a
it's
good point.
paying off for the Wings. The Wings kept him, and he's definitely gone through a lot of losing. And granted, the Red Wings have kind of fallen back, but aside, if he was maybe more healthy throughout the season, they might be there. But I think now you look at it and you go, well, thank God the Wings didn't trade Dylan Larkin like 2 years ago, because they definitely need him now, and he's a cornerstone of that team. But I don't know if the Coyotes are like 2 years away from being legitimate contenders for the playoffs in this Western Conference. I'm just not sure about that, especially given the fact that their defense is it's pretty suspect. There's not much there.
No one signed beyond this year.
No one signed beyond. I mean,
Jay Weber.
$41 million in cap space going into next year. With, yes, a whole bunch of RFAs that aren't going to get paid a ton of money. So it's kind of like somehow the cupboards are bare, but they haven't been good forever. Yeah, they have some decent prospects, but they're already up with the team.
Yeah, that's the thing. And so, you talk about those RFAs. Yeah, Sean Durzi might get a few bucks more, but he's not going to eat up, like a $10 million contract or $8 million contract.
Maybe three and a half, something like that. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more, but regardless, I think they're going to end up doing the same thing they did this offseason, where they overpay a couple free agents to take 1-year deals and see how it turns out. And then maybe at the deadline, if they're not there, they sell off, and that's it again. And they're probably going to go through this roller coaster over the next 2 or 3 years until guys like Logan Cooley and Gunther, right, are ready to take the reins and go.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, well, obviously for the draft, they're a very important team because of all the picks they have. They could potentially move up and move around in the draft. So it'll be exciting to see what they do there. But until then, the most exciting thing is a town hall meeting or a city council meeting and an auction on land. So, maybe they'll live stream the auction. Do you think it's going to be like a cattle auction? Like, 575 million over here.
There's no way they're live streaming that, because if they fail to secure the bid, it's going to be a disaster.
No, but wouldn't it be genius as a reporter to go in there and be like, I'm live streaming this? I might watch.
Yeah, I guess
I might watch.
There'll be a few viewers, I'm sure. Yeah,
I want to see it. All right, let's go to the Montreal Canadiens. We'll head east. The Montreal Canadiens are, I'd say, as expected, last in this division. I'm pretty sure both of us had Montreal dead last for division. They finish, they've got 66 points right now, probably around 72 to 75 points. What do you think of the Canadian season? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, it's been interesting, right? It's been up and down, but I've been interested in watching Martin St. Louis, and I'm glad to hear he's back. I don't know really the details about why he left and took that leave of absence, but glad to see him back. Hope he's doing well.
Something about his son. I'm not really sure what happened, but doesn't matter. He's back.
Yeah, exactly. But what I've liked the most really is seeing like some of the younger players take the reins a little bit more. Like Jaromír Slafkovský. I was a little worried about this guy last year. I was kind of, granted, yes, he's 18 years old, but you tend to worry, like, is he really going to fit into Martin St. Louis's system? Is he going to be a long-term piece for this team? Because it didn't really seem like he had a place there yet. But he's seemingly, starting to fit in. I think he's looking pretty good there. And obviously you've got Suzuki and Caulfield. They're looking phenomenal under St. Louis, and hopefully they take another step, right? They're still young, 23, 24. So hopefully you get a little bit of growth out of them. The only thing really is, long-term, Montembeault, I liked what I've seen out of him this year, but is he a long-term solution? I don't think so. But, again, for 35 games, I like what he's brought in. He's deserved that extension. So hopefully, maybe they find, whether it's Primu or somebody else coming in next year and stepping up as in a backup or even maybe a starter's role. I'd like to see a little bit of growth there in that position. And then, of course, just bringing in young guys and continuing to grow that, whether it's David Reinbacher or, somebody else on this team that they continue to draft, in this offseason. I want to see the young guys come in and want to see them just take another step.
Yeah, I think this season, this is what I'll say. I cannot remember an NHL season where the Montreal Canadiens have felt more invisible than ever.
That's a perfect word.
It's like they're just, they're playing their games. Hey, Nick Suzuki is going to get 30 goals this year. That's fantastic. He's going to get over 70 points again. You've got Cole Caulfield. He's got his 20 goals and he's kind of rolling, and he's going to get 60 points. And you're right. You're seeing some great progression from a lot of their guys. Pleased with Slafkovsky. You're really happy about how Arbor Jacki has taken another step. I think that, yes, offensively he's not great, but that's not why you have him there. He had some injuries, but I think you're pleased with the fact that you've got a homegrown top 4 defenseman in the waiting there, and you can't be mad about what's happened because you knew you were going to finish last. It was the expectation all along, and guys have developed. And I just, when the expectations are zero, it's honestly hard to care about watching this team unless they're playing the team that you are cheering for, or you're a big Montreal fan, then you're watching them regardless. But a pretty ho-hum year. And even at the trade deadline, where a team like this would generally be a team that would be incredibly active, they didn't really have a whole lot to do other than trading Jake Allen, and the rest mostly because they don't really have a whole lot of UFAs other than Tanner Pearson, and he wasn't moving again. So I would think this offseason, I think you're going to hear some names. I think Josh Anderson is absolutely going to be on the block. I think, if there's a place where Brendan Gallagher could go, I got to think that that's something that's going to be on Montreal's mind. Brendan Gallagher is not effective on a bum team. Like, this is a bum team. They're not good. He's not really the kind of guy that you need to be like, go out there and show him how to win, because he's a 30-point guy, 35-point guy. He's making too much money. But if you cut it in half, would you take a Brendan Gallagher on a team on your third line on a playoff team? I think you would. I think he could be really valuable.
Yeah, he brings some intangibles and some grit, right? I always love having a little sandpaper on my team. So for me, a Gallagher, if I can get him at $3.25 million bucks, I would absolutely give up a 4th or maybe 5th round pick for a guy like that. But now with Josh Anderson, I'm not trading for him no matter what you throw my way. You'd have to throw in a 1st round pick for me to take that contract back the other way. And so I think the more likely scenario for a guy like that, only maybe putting up
bought out.
Yeah, is getting bought out. So next year, if you bought out his contract, he'd only bring in a $222,000 cap hit. And then it's like $2 million a year after that, 3, and then it goes down to like 1.6 for the next few years after that. So that's something I think Montreal could definitely eat. Do they want to spend that money? No, but listen, they're one of the richest teams in hockey. So,
would you be willing to bring Josh Anderson in for $2.25 million?
No, not if I'm a team. I'm not touching him for any amount of money. I want him at league minimum. A 1 year, $1 million, show it and prove it to me kind of deal.
All right.
Yep.
Fine.
You can have him.
Yeah. All right. Well, he's always kills the Leafs. I think like 4 of those 8 goals that he scored this year have come against the Leafs, something like that. I got to think that David Savard, he's somebody who they'll consider moving. If they just want to keep getting younger, they've got the guys that they can move. And Joel Armia will probably be a deadline move next year. But yeah, Montreal, I think they'll just keep trying to grab picks. They've got 2 first-round picks this year from the trade they made with Winnipeg and for Sean Monahan. So yeah,
I'll tell you what, speaking of Sean Monahan, he's a guy I would even consider in the offseason re-signing and giving a bigger deal to. Yeah.
He was a great fit there.
Yep.
And God knows that Winnipeg won't sign the guy that they trade for. It just seems to never happen. People get traded there and they're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think I want to go home. I want to go somewhere else. All right. All right. There's Montreal. Let's go back to the West and head to the Seattle Kraken. Seattle, obviously huge expectations coming into this year with making the playoffs, winning in the first round, beating the Stanley Cup champions in the Colorado Avalanche. And this year they just can't seem to find it. What do you think was the issue with this team this year compared to last year where they had great success?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue was primarily they weren't getting the production out of, towards the end of the year, obviously they had Matty Beniers, giving them that kind of production. And I think, not only not getting that lack of, production out of the younger guys, they were getting, not so much production out of a guy like Alex Wenberg, but essentially it was mostly due to the fact that they were missing scoring on the bottom lines, right? That bottom six wasn't producing as much. Brandon Tanev, only 11 points so far this year. Last year, I mean, they had, Daniel Sprong just lighting it up, 20 goals. I mean, it was just, they were getting production from all four lines and they had speed on all four lines. And I think this year that's what they were really missing more than anything else. And, it doesn't help too that you have a guy like Vince Dunn who's constantly in and out, not healthy. Jaden Schwartz not staying healthy. So, that plays a little bit of a factor too. And, they tried to bring in a guy like Thomas Tatar to try to help that a little bit. And he's been all right in there. He hasn't been great, but he's been okay. But, I think the fact that most of their top guys can't stay healthy, Andre Burakovsky, they just can't stay in the lineup, right, these guys. And so that and the lack of scoring on your depth lines just has killed them.
Would you believe that their power play and their penalty kill have both gotten statistically better than last year? Last year, they were at 19.75 on the power play. They were 21st in the league on the power play and 21st in the league in penalty killing. And funny enough, this year they're 16th on the power play and 17th on the penalty kill. So their special teams have gotten better. But my God, they went from 5th in the league in goals scored to now 29th. Fourth last. The only teams that have scored fewer goals are the Anaheim Ducks, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the San Jose Sharks.
Wow.
Even the Montreal Canadiens, the Washington Capitals, bad teams are scoring a lot more goals than the Kraken. And it's just, that is weird to go from scoring so often and just being prolific offensively that they were last year to now being in a place where you just can't seem to put the puck in the net. And funny enough, 2 years ago, their first year in the league, they were 29th in the league in scoring at 2.6 goals a game. And this year they're at 2.62 goals per game. So it's like last year, big aberration. And we're kind of seeing them come back down to earth. Now, 2 years ago, their power play was 14.5%, which is good for 29th in the league. So they are improving in other places. I think it's showing that they have increased in skill, but they just haven't been able to put it all together this year at all. And I think some of that is just maybe you have expectations now, and it makes it a lot harder to win. Teams are looking out for you, and it is more difficult to do it again. And no one's having their career year. Like Jared McCann, he's got 27 goals. That's great, but he had 40 last year. That's a 30% dip in production, where you're missing it from guys at the top all the way to guys at the bottom. And I think for Seattle, this is really just, you're hoping that a Shane Wright can come in next year and actually make this lineup, make you better offensively, and continue to grow. Like I would guess that we'll look back and we'll go, yep, that second year in the league, that was a weird year. They came out of nowhere. I think this team is probably not a playoff team again next year as they grow into becoming a better team.
Yeah, that's the question, right? And you look at this team versus other teams that are in the playoffs. They don't have any superstars or any kind of, not even a superstar, but any stars, right? At least in, like, for example, a team like Nashville, they've got Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly and UC Saros and Roman Josi. So they've got some star power there. Vegas, right? We know about all the star power there. LA, all these teams have it, but Seattle, there's no one on here really. I mean, we were expecting Matty Beniers and possibly Shane Wright to be that, but maybe you could throw Vince Dunn's name in there when he's healthy, right? He's a star defenseman in this league. I think you could probably put him top 20 defenseman in this league. Maybe there's an argument there, but outside of that, I mean, there really isn't any high-end talent on this team. And when
I would say I like Jared McCann is high end. He's the 30 goal guy. I'd give that to him. He also doesn't have unbelievable talent playing with him either. So I think he's probably in a pretty good spot. But I mean, Matty Beniers, he's really fallen off. 11 goals compared to 24 last year, 31 points compared to 57. I mean, that's a huge fall off.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? When he's not having any consistent line partners because everybody's getting injured. Burakovsky's out. Jaden Schwartz is out, so nobody's really in the lineup full time. And again, when you talk about that depth, right? Yanni Gourde, here's another guy who the last 2 years in Seattle, 48 points a season, and this year 26. So it shows, right? And so if you don't have that consistent scoring throughout the lineup, it's going to be tough in this league to stay on top.
He has to be, to me, talking about Yanni Gourde, the most disappointing pick of the expansion draft for Seattle. There was a lot of hope that he could be a really good player for them. I mean, you think about where Tampa Bay was the year that he was taken. I mean, it was kind of like, oh shoot, Tampa Bay is really going to miss this guy. And then he got taken and Tampa Bay wins the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably throw Philip Grubauer's name under that bus first, but Yanni Gourde is a close second on that list for sure.
Yeah, but Grubauer was a free agent signing. He wasn't a
very true.
Wasn't
Good point.
Expansion draft pick.
Yeah, good point.
But I understand what you're saying. Yes, he may be the most disappointing player in the first year of their season. Of course, I would agree with that. But Yanni Gourde, I think the expectation was that, hey, he's buried on Tampa's lineup. We bring him in here. He could be a 60, 70-point guy. And really, he's not even been a 50-point guy. So I think he's been quite the disappointment there. And I wonder, does Seattle try to move on from him? He's got one more year left at 5.1, 6 repeating. I would think he would be a decent player to go, he's just not really moving the needle for us very much. Let's cut bait. Let him go somewhere else.
Well, so here's the thing, though. He had 2 48-point years up until this season. So, if you think, okay, cool, we could get this guy back to form, right, with maybe a little tweaking in the offseason, sure, you keep him. But maybe you also look at that and you look at other teams and you say, hey, you know what? This guy was a 50-point guy with us. Last year was a fluke, right? So, you've got something there if you want to grab him, right? And at $5 million, get a 50-point guy. Or even if you eat a couple $1 million of that, I think you could easily move him for $3.5-4 million. And maybe try to sell. I mean, you're not going to get a ton back. You might get a third-round pick and a prospect, but depends if you want to move out some money and try to, sign somebody in free agency that can move the needle a little bit more, like a Matt Duchene, for example, right? You could overpay for a guy like that. This could be a guy that you could move out to try to free some salary.
Why does everybody overpay for Matt Duchene? Except
but then they all regret losing him too.
Well, yeah, but they regret losing him after he goes and has one good year with one team. There's those guys where they go to a new team, they play great. It's Evander Kane, man. Evander Kane goes to a new team, is great, and then he just kind of starts to. Now with Edmonton, it's been okay because Edmonton is good. Other than the first 6 weeks of the season, but other than that, they've been pretty darn good the whole time he's been there. Okay, let's move on from Seattle and let's come back to the Eastern Conference. Let's do the Ottawa Senators, who probably out of any Canadian team had the highest expectations going into this year and did not meet them in any way, shape, or form.
Well, first, let me say, I think Toronto had the highest expectations, but I think out of just any.
Well, sorry, I meant like expectations versus what actually happened.
The separation, right? Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I think even if Toronto bounces out in the first round, I still think the gap isn't as far, right? I agree with you on that one. So, yeah, for me, Ottawa was a team that, right, they were supposed to be competing for a playoff spot. They were supposed to take that next step with the Buffalo Sabres in this division, right? There was a lot of talk about, Detroit's going to be, out of Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit's the worst. Ottawa should be right there at the top. I mean, the talent they had. Gosh, they went out and made that move for Jacob Chikrin. They had Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, all of these just amazing pieces coming in. And Korpisalo, who, had a phenomenal time in LA. So you figure, okay, cool. We've got a long-term solution in net. That problem solved. We got great leadership up front with Brady Tkachuk and Claude Giroux. There's no way we're missing, right? There's no way we could possibly screw this up. I even saw or was listening to XM at the beginning of the year, and some couple guys actually picked DJ Smith to win the Jack Adams Award.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoopses, right? But for me, right, yeah, I'm with you. The Senators have been a huge disappointment. Obviously they have Shane Pinto, get suspended at the beginning of the year. Now he looks like, man, could you imagine a guy like Shane Pinto playing throughout the entire year? Because he's been almost a point per game guy on this team so far this season. And if you had that all year long, what a difference that kind of production would have made.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt that some injuries have hurt this team. And some of the ownership stuff, I think, made it trying on a couple guys. But, overall, it just, to me, doesn't seem like this mix is working. Like there's something off somewhere. And I think you got to figure it out. You got to figure out where is the disconnect here. Because I understand this is almost identical to the New Jersey Devils. The Devils, 2 years ago, it was, boy, I wonder if they could just get some goaltending. What would happen? Well, last year they got some goaltending. And this year it's been a struggle. New Jersey's had injuries plus bad goaltending. But for 1 year they got good goaltending. And they won in the first round. They went to the second round of the playoffs. The Ottawa Senators have gotten awful goaltending all year long. And that has really created every other problem that they have. So,
well, yeah, it goes back
to figure out your goaltending.
Yeah, if you're not confident in what's behind you, right, you squeeze your stick a little harder. You're not pinching up as much. You're a little hesitant to make plays, right, and go ham. And yeah, we've clearly seen the trickle down effect that's caused. And obviously, it cost DJ Smith his job. They brought in, a whole new, they brought in new general management this offseason. So there's been a whole change in the guard and, defensive structure now with Jacques Martin. And who knows, right, if these guys are really going to, can take that next level, right? I think that's the one thing in today's NHL when you're trying to play just nothing but defense, right? Can you make that next step and take that leap as far as the standings are concerned?
Well, and we know Jacques Martin's not going to be back next year. So to me, I have a little bit of like, well, all right, so these guys, they might be playing for their jobs, some of them. But a lot of these guys are going to go, well, I don't really have a lot to play for now. So I'm just going to stay healthy. I'm going to get to the off season. We'll see who the coach is next year, and we'll kind of go from there. Because I don't know. It doesn't seem like a whole lot to play for anymore. It really has been a mess. But I think, unlike some of these other teams, Ottawa has a very young core. There is a ton of talent here, and they just have to figure out, where is this like pivot point of like we should be good but we're not. What's happening? Where's the disconnect? So once they figure that out, I think they'll be in good shape. But you know what? The Buffalo Sabres have been here before. The Buffalo Sabres have said, look at all this talent that we have on our roster. We'll make the playoffs. No, you won't. It's the weirdest thing. Ottawa and Montreal have just kind of had this back and forth the last 5 years or so of like, which one's gonna kind of take a step forward? And really, you would say Buffalo in my mind, has taken more of a step forward this year, despite now trading Casey Middlestat, but bringing in Bowen Byram. Like, I think Buffalo has an unreal defense. Ottawa should have a good defense, but it's this goaltending. This goaltending's almost like shading everything, where you can't fully tell what's going on until you can get a save. As if you were getting that extra save, this might be a slightly different season for Ottawa. And it didn't help that they were they were like 10 games behind everybody else.
Oh,
I think that was weird too. So
yeah. And then, so here's my question with this offseason, right? You talk about that defense and what Buffalo has, but I've been hearing rumors since the deadline that Chychrun's name's on the block, that he's probably going to get moved in the offseason. He's just not, I don't know if he's just not enjoying it there, or they're just not clicking with him on this team. But,
who would enjoy playing there?
Well, of course. But I mean, are you looking to bring in a guy like Jacob Chychrun if you're another team and you're willing to give up a big piece? Because I think that's what Ottawa wants, right? They want an NHL ready player, somebody who can step in, not maybe necessarily on defense. It could be someone up front, but are you, going to bring in Jacob Chychrun and willing to move another piece? And if you're Ottawa, are you prepared to move him out? Because I think, if they get to the offseason and he's not re-signed, I think you have to move him.
I would agree. Yeah. You're in the same position that you've always been in with Carlson, with Mark Stone, with, name any number of Ottawa Senator that Alex DeBrincat is the most recent example last year. You just have to move him because you can't afford. And at this point, he's not a rental. Your team's not good enough. So what? Even if you go make the playoffs next year, you're not going to win the cup next year. You're not there. So I think that a lot of soul searching left for the Ottawa Senators, and we'll see if they can figure out their goaltending situation. Hopefully they don't go into next year with honestly, it all comes back to here's the reason why oh my gosh, their general manager, their former GM's name is slipping my mind right now.
Yeah, he's slipping my mind too. I don't know why.
Oh dear, that's terrible. Yep. For all of our listeners at home who are sitting there going, "What the? How are you guys not? How do you guys not know this? You talk about hockey every week, but it is Pierre Dorion. My God, Pierre Dorion. The reason, his final big move, bringing in Jonas Korpisalo, and yes, Korpisalo had 10 good games for LA last year. 11. Here's the thing, crazy thing. So, yes, he had 11 really good games, and I think the people were like, "Oh, look he's improved. He's playing with a good team, so that that's a good sign for him." He had an .892 save percentage in the playoffs. He was terrible in the playoffs for the Kings,
but he looked good in Columbus, though. Basically
carried that over into Ottawa. So I don't know. I think that the writing was on the wall long before that. The year before with an .877, the year before that with an .894, 2 years before that, .897, the year before that, .897. He's never really been that good of a goalie. He's had little 25 to 30 game stretches, and that's it.
Yeah, to me, I think this team they're bigger issues on the back end, right? I think Thomas Chabot is okay defensively, but he's not great. And same with Jake Sanderson, right? These are guys, Jake Sanderson's a guy who's still learning how to play the game, right? And you're paying him $8 million to play top minutes.
Next year. They're paying him $8 million next year.
Right, next year. But here's the thing, though. If I'm Ottawa, I'm moving Jacob Chychrun out to try to find myself a top 6 scoring winger, and I'm going to go out and sign myself, maybe it's Chris Tanev, right? Maybe a guy on the back end. I want a guy on the back end who brings in the defensive game. That's purely what he's good at, right? It's just playing that defensive game. He's not going to put up a lot of points on the back end, but he's going to shut down other teams' top pairings. That's what I want, and that's what I think this team needs. And once that's figured out, and maybe you give a little bit more confidence back to that goaltending, I think Korpisalo could be good enough to carry this team. Now, is he going to carry them through a playoff series like a guy like UC Saros will in Nashville? Absolutely not. But I think he would give them good enough goaltending to win and get in the playoffs.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, there's the Ottawa Senators. And they'll make their likely 2 first-round selections next year. Ottawa. All right, let's head back to the Western Conference and the Calgary Flames. The Flames, I think, teams where people were split on where they thought this team could be. Had Jonathan Huberdeau had a really down year, and we thought that no Daryl Sutter, he's going to become himself again. Was he going to get 100 points? No. But should he have, 70 points? I don't think that anybody thought he wouldn't. Like, did we really think that he was going to be worse than he was last year? 44 points, a minus 23. It's the worst of his career. Jonathan Huberdeau is probably the worst contract in the NHL. I don't know that anyone comes close.
Yeah, that's that's a real good question, and I have to agree with you. I don't think anybody comes close as far as worst contract in the NHL. And I think, you know what, it's been surprising. We've seen some names pop up on this team. Look, they moved out some players this offseason and or this regular season and last offseason because they were coming up on expiring deals. We knew they weren't going to re-sign, right? So they bring in pieces like Sharon Govich. He's worked out very, very well, I think, on that team. We've got some younger guys like Connor Zary, who's looked pretty good when he's healthy. And I think he'll take another step next year. So maybe next year, right, things might work out a little bit better. But boy, they've got a lot of retooling to do this offseason. So even though you're going to be stuck with like the main players, it's still going to be a whole new team next season.
Well, and the question is, are you fully rebuilding? Like, are we going into where, because they already, Tanev, Zaitsev, Hanifin, basically half your defense is gone. And you've got another Oliver Shillington is a UFA. I think possibility he resigns there, and Jacob Markstrom is almost certainly gone. I would think that he will be a Devil at some point, even with the Jake Allen acquisition. I think there's a chance, but I think Jacob Markstrom is probably gone. So at that point, you have to ask, like, yeah, Huberdeau, Kadri, you're not going to be able to move those guys, but like Mangiapane, Kuzmenko's a UFA, Sharon Govich, Kevin Rooney, like these guys are all going to be UFAs next year. I don't know where this team's going to end up, but I think that we're headed for Calgary being in the basement, or they go, we're keeping everybody. They go out, they sign somebody next year, and they take another crack at this. And if they do that, I still don't see how. Maybe they finish in a playoff spot because the West has been pretty turbulent. But are they winning a round or two? Are they going to be cup contenders? No. Like, this team is so middling. And I think that as a Flames fan, I'd be like, just tear the whole freaking thing down. Let's go. Let's figure this out.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Give Craig Conroy the freedom to do what he needs to do.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. I don't think there's enough in the tank as far as prospects are concerned for me to say, you know what, we've got pieces coming. We've got guys coming up to where I feel confident if we hang on to some of our veteran guys, if we hang on to some of our, middle-aged, when I say middle-aged, like, 24, 25-year-old kids, that in the next couple of years we can really have this thing rolling, right? But I don't foresee that really. To me, I mean, you've got a couple decent prospects, but nothing to where – look, I just took a quick peek, and HockeyWriters.com has them ranked as 17th best in the NHL. And to me, that's not enough to feel confident about, a long-term successful retool on the fly. Yes, middling.
Middling, even in their prospect pool.
Yes. So to me, I'm selling off every piece I can, right? And that includes Jacob Markstrom. And I think the minute Jacob Markstrom goes, you have to rebuild because Dustin Wolf, I get it. He's supposed to be the future in net, but is he ready now? No.
That's fine. Yeah, let him be the future. But yeah, not now. You can keep playing him. He can be your number one goalie. That's fine. If you're okay with him, kind of working through his stuff at the National Hockey League level, I think he's good enough to play in the NHL. You just need to make sure that you probably need a three-headed monster if you're going to have Dustin Wolf be your 1A. I love the three-headed monster. Here's why I love it. Because I'm seeing it firsthand in Toronto this year. Got three defensemen or three goaltenders all year long. Martin Jones, Ilya Samsonov, and Joseph Wall. Now, granted, somebody's been hurt almost all the time, so it hasn't been an issue. But the other night, Samsonov gets shelled, or he gets hurt, and they bring in Martin Jones because Joseph Wall was playing the next night. So he doesn't have to play, right? Like you can actually bring in a true backup goalie, and then the next night, your real starter gets to start, as opposed to like, well, I have no choice. I have to play half the game. And then you're going to play the whole game the next day. Like it creates a big buffer so you can actually give someone the day off. Like a goalie does not have to take all the reps that you would have to take in warm up and, putting on the pads and getting there at a certain time to play and preparing and having to prepare like you're going to play, even if you're not starting. So I think it's genius. I think that it makes guys better when they don't have to play at all. And here's the kicker. If you had 2 injuries in goal, you could bring that guy into the net, as opposed to having to go out and finding the college kid in the crowd to come play goalie for you. You could go to your third goalie. I
don't hate the 3-headed monster system. I'm not opposed to it, but I think you have to basically decide, right? Do I have a goaltender who can play 60 games and be that number 1 guy, right? Or do I want to go with a couple 1Bs and a backup, right? So you get a guy who can, especially like, for instance, you talk about Dustin Wolf, right? You can play him 30 games. You can play another guy 30 games, another guy 20. You don't wear these guys out. And I think, for example, I'm seeing that in Detroit firsthand, right? They brought in Alex Lyon. He was phenomenal to start, but now I think they played him too much.
And he's not that guy who can play a bunch of games.
Yeah, exactly. And James Reimer now has to come in, and he's had to play a lot. That's not really been his bag. But if they had, a third goaltender in there, unfortunately, Husso's been injured all year. But had they had that third goaltender, right, they have another guy they can put in there, and you don't have to really worry about.
They do have a third goaltender. That's the whole thing. Imagine if they only had 2.
Well, yeah, okay, they're even better. To your point there, right?
They would not be in a playoff picture right now.
Yes, absolutely.
They still have a shot. And maybe not ideal that Reimer plays at all. But is he better than your AHL goalie? Yes.
Yeah. So to your point, I like the 3-headed monster system, but it just depends on, again, who's your 1A, right? Or who's your number 1. So if it's not a guy that you're confident is a number 1A, then go with the 3-headed system, pay, 3 guys $2.5 million and work it out that way.
All right. Okay. Let's finish off with maybe the most disappointing team out of all the teams we've talked about today, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Ugh. They went out and acquired Erik Karlsson, and he was supposed to get this team over the hump. They were 1 freaking win away from beating the Chicago freaking Blackhawks. The garbage team had nothing to play for last year. They missed the playoffs by that game. And we all thought Erik Karlsson coming in, he could make up that small difference. And it has been nothing short of a disaster. And the Pittsburgh Penguins missed the playoffs for a 2nd year in a row, first time ever under Sidney Crosby. And it's and the first time that Kyle Dubas has ever missed the playoffs as a general manager.
Good point. Yeah.
I just want to say, you, Kyle. That's what you get for having doubts.
Yeah, this has been. I mean, I would probably say that Calgary might be more disappointing to me, but
really,
yeah, I think so. Just because,
you think so?
Yeah, just because I knew, like, don't get me wrong, Sidney Crosby's still Sidney Crosby, but the rest of the team was aging, right? And I didn't have a lot of faith in Tristan Jarry to rebound his game a little bit. I figured he would still be a subpar goaltender, good enough. But with guys like, guys like Jeff Carter, Lars Eller on the team, I didn't have a lot of faith in that bottom 6 to really provide the depth scoring that I think they needed. And Riley Smith was a nice addition, but I didn't think he was, going to be a world beater or a line driver. So to me, I figured they had a bunch of middle 6 guys and, one really good player at Sidney Crosby, and that was about it.
All right. Well, I think that with Calgary, it kind of seemed like things were unraveling a little bit. Pittsburgh, I thought that maybe they just, it's Sidney Crosby. You just kind of assume that he's going to be able to figure it out for them, kind of thing. And he's done his darndest. But yeah, either way, both teams disappointing. But yeah, it looks like maybe Kyle Dubas has a lot more work to do. And I wonder if ownership is looking at this going, I mean, do we really want to keep on like going all in? How much more do you have? What can you possibly do to go all in again? You let these guys come back. You let Malkin come back. You let Letang come back. You bring in Carlson. You re-sign Tristan Jarry to a pretty long deal. You've got $12 million in cap space next year, and you gotta find a replacement for what Jeff Carter was when Jeff Carter was decent, and that's going to be, I think, maybe not that big of a challenge because you're going to have someone out there who goes, yeah, I would love to go play with Crosby. Like, here's my dream scenario. The Tampa Bay Lightning decide to be a bunch of douchebags, and they say, you know what, Stamkos, we're not willing to give you that money. Stamkos goes and says, all right, Sidney, I'm coming with you. And they hitch their wagons together and go see what they can do together.
Oh, boy.
That would be pretty fun.
I mean, I'll admit, right? We could just call this the retirement team, the retirement center. I don't know what you want to call it, but
yeah, but it's Pittsburgh. Why would you want to retire in Pittsburgh?
I mean, this is where the old guys go at this point, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing now, right? They might be the oldest team in hockey, but I mean, look at this team. Their wingers are essentially Brian Rust, Ricard Raquel, Riley Smith, and Michael Bunting. Like, that's nothing about that screams a playoff team to me. So, Malkin, I don't know what's going on with him. He's just looked very middling this season. You'll be lucky if he gets 60 points this season. So, for me, you're always going to have something at Sidney Crosby. But what I'm more curious about is what's going to happen this offseason with him, right? Does he I don't know if he goes to management at any point and says, you know what, I want to move on. But does management go to him and say, hey, we'd like to move you? Are you interested?
No. If they do, then Kyle Dubas is the dumbest person in the league. You can't.
If they lose Sidney Crosby, right, whether it's to free agency or they just trade him at some point, right, you have to rebuild this team. I think you have to start tearing it down at that point. But
Crosby's not going to leave after convincing Malkin and Letang to come there.
I agree with you on that one.
The douchiest move. The douchiest move. And I don't think he'd do that. I think he's going to want to see if he can help right the ship. I don't think they go to him for that. I think it's more likely that you go, well, like, what can we do? Maybe a Ricard Raquel move. Riley Smith, you're probably moving on from him. You're just going to try and patchwork this thing. Or maybe you can convince guys, like the NBA is much more prolific at this. The NBA has guys who go, come play with me. Let's go. Let's build a team. And it's players trying to convince other guys to come sign there. That's what Crosby needs to do. He needs to go to someone like Stamkos and say, dude, come here. I know you've been in Tampa. You did your thing. Come to Pittsburgh and let's win together. Like Sam Reinhart, come to Pittsburgh. Maybe that's a spot. Pay him the money and bring in a Sam Reinhart. Or I think there maybe would be a small chance that Jake Gensel would be willing to go back if the option was on the table. But I mean, I don't see any other option. Like, you got to use Sidney Crosby to convince some good free agents to come there.
Well, he's going to have to convince them to come in at a cheaper rate. That's for sure. Because
right.
They've got to be smart with their money, right? They've still got to fill out their bottom six somehow with Jeff Carter going. I think maybe you try to move Lars Eller out at some point. You try to maybe move Marcus Pettersson so you can free up a little bit more money and, maybe find a few cheap defensemen and get some guys on that bottom six that can score.
Yeah. Yep. No depth scoring right now. And now, I think July 1st, Crosby's going to come out. He's going to sign like a 3-year deal, 2-year deal, $8.7 million. again, or it'll be like 10.87 or something like that.
Oh, I think he's signing for less money, to be quite honest.
Even less? You think so?
Yeah, I think he's made his money. He's not really concerned about that. And if he's serious about winning and bringing in people long term, or at least over the next 2 or 3 years to really, right the ship really quick, he's got to sign for less money. And I think, he might
or
sign
just the same money. If he signs at 8.7, I mean, that's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in 2 years, yeah, that's not going to be much. But I would suspect he signs a 3x7 deal. And that's what gets it done for Pittsburgh. And then he can use some of that extra cap space to bring in a few guys, long term, or not maybe long term, but for a 3 or 4 year stint to try to really get one more.
Yeah, but I wonder, is the only way you're willing to take a discount if you can go, here's the guy we're going to sign. This is why we need you to take a haircut.
Well, I think that's Crosby, right? To come back and say, hey, I'm going to sign at this rate so you can sign this guy. So go get him. Go get him signed first. And then when I'm due for my extension here at, this date, I'll sign after you get him re-signed, this offseason or whatever. Then I'll re-sign.
Yeah. Yep. Well, yes, it'll be interesting to see what the Penguins do because they're in such limbo. Like they don't even feel like a middling team. They feel like maybe they outperform themselves because Crosby's so good. Like without Crosby, is this team hanging out with Montreal and Columbus way, way, way down in the cellar?
And they don't have a good prospect pool either, so nothing's coming up. I mean, maybe outside of, gosh, I don't even know who's coming up at this point. It gets me excited for this team.
Yeah, they've traded away much of what they've had in order to continue doing what they're doing, and that's fair. That's what they should be doing. They did take Owen Pickering on defense with their 2022 first round pick, 21st overall. So he's the next guy coming. He actually had a great year in the WHL for the Swift Current Broncos. So that's probably who you're looking for. And but he's probably not going to play next year. You're not playing a 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid on defense for a team that you're really desperate to make the playoffs. It's pretty rare.
Yeah, I mean the Red Wings did it with Mo Sider, but I think he was.
But they were in a spot where they knew they weren't going to make the playoffs.
That's true. Good point. Yeah.
All right. Well, farewell to all these lovely teams that failed to meet expectations. We, salute you. Wish you luck in the ground. Most of them died long ago, and they're just playing out the rest of the year to go play some golf. So we'll do some more funerals in the coming weeks as we near playoff time. I think we'll of course be doing lots of playoff previews and whatnot as we get closer. I think we're 2.5 weeks away from playoffs.
Yeah, we've already got one team written in already.
The Rangers are in, right? So
the Rangers are in, baby.
The Rangers are in. And I think for the other teams, it's like they need 1 point and they're in.
Right.
So we've got quite a few teams that are going to start popping there. Best of luck to all those teams. Enjoy, all the games that are if they matter for your team, then enjoy all those games. If not, then watch some baseball or something.
Baseball.
I don't know. Are you a baseball guy? Do you watch baseball at all?
No, I stopped watching it because they're just it's too boring, man. It
is.
And now I don't understand half the rules anyways, like a catcher can balk, and I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't get it anymore.
They're ruining the game I love.
They're not even ruining it. It's just not even fun anymore.
I never loved it to begin with, so I don't really care. But anyways, enjoy the games this week, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Find us on Twitter, Instagram @OT Hockey Talk. We'll talk to you later.